Look, what's happening right now is exactly this. The Russians are in the process, and their allies, by the way. We should point out that most of the fighting that's taking place today is taking place in the independent republics of Lugansk and Donetsk, at least independent in terms of how Russia has recognized them. Ukraine, the United States, and others don't. But these republics believe they're independent, and they both have generated militias that are fighting in their defense. And these militias are actually carrying the brunt of the fighting that's going on and suffering the most casualties. So it's not just the Russians; it's the Russians and their allies. The Ukrainians had 8 years to dig in, and they spent every day digging in. They put that time to good use, and the fortifications that exist are unlike anything we've seen since World War I. These are fortifications that, look, I could take Marines, we could breach these fortifications in a day. All right, that's just the way it is. But we're going to lose a lot of Marines. Now that's okay. We build monuments to dead Marines. The Iwo Jima Memorial memorializes the slaughter of 5,000 Marines in Iwo Jima. I'm sure we could have put one up for Tarawa. In any battle that the Marine Corps fought in history, it's what we were trained to do. The Russians have decided they don't want to build monuments to dead Russians, that they would prefer that they keep the casualty figures as low as possible, recognizing this war and there will be casualties. As such, they've created a methodology of applying the tools of the trade, so to speak, to this unique circumstance that exists in Ukraine, the breaching of these fortifications. Anecdotally, you have Ukrainians over and over and over again. It's not just one story, it's not two, it's 10, 20, 30, 40. It's repeated over and over again about how they went to the front lines ready to fight the Russians, wanting to fight the Russians, desperate to fight the Russians. And then they spent the next several days sitting in their trenches getting blown up, losing 50, 60% of their forces, finally having to be withdrawn, bloodied, defeated, without ever seeing a Russian. That's the nature of this war. The vast majority of the Ukrainians who die never see a Russian. And those who do see Russians tend to surrender to them rather quickly because they've been given no hope. The Russians have perfected this methodology. And right now we're looking at casualty ratios of 20 to 30 to 1. That means for every one dead Russian, you're losing 20 to 30 dead Ukrainians. This is unheard of in modern warfare. Now, what happens when you breach the defenses and suddenly you come up into the wide open spaces? Do the Russians now throw away this methodology that they perfected and go back to the operational mobile group with reinforced brigades running wild in the enemy's rear area with big arrow war? No. Why? Because big arrow war brings big casualty lists. When one takes a look, for instance, at the destruction of Army Group Center in 1944, one of the greatest defeats of Nazi forces by the Soviets, they annihilated Army Group Center, drove it back, inflicted 1 million casualties, but they lost hundreds of thousands of dead in the process because the Germans knew how to fight. Well, you know who else knows how to fight? The Ukrainians. We can mock them all we want. It is, they're getting blown up by the Russians. Yeah, so would you. So would anybody if they got thrown in that situation. But if you give the Ukrainians a chance to see you, fix you, find you, they will finish you. They're not cowards. They are hard fighters. And the last thing the Russians want to do is bring about an equilibrium on the battlefield where the Ukrainians and the Russians are meeting as relative equals. Russia will win, but the casualties will be high. So I think what we're going to see is once the defensive lines are breached, that the Russians are going to play a game with the Ukrainians called, we're going to give you time to dig in. And the Ukrainians are going to go, they're giving us time to dig in. We're going to dig in. And then the Russians will repeat the same process all over again. They will take over the rest of the territorial objectives with little bite-sized pieces. I don't think we're going to see big arrows because big arrows mean big casualties. So that's That's what I think is going to happen. And I think in explaining that, I just gave away the advice I would give to the Russian military. Don't do big arrows. Keep the casualties small. Magnify all your advantage. Keep the Ukrainians off balance. But they don't need me to tell them that. The Russian officer corps is one of the best trained officer corps in the world, second only to the United States Marine Corps. I'm just throwing that in as self-promoting advertisement. But the point is, the Russians know what they're doing. There's a reason why they're achieving the successes that they are today, and that's because they're a very solid military. But again, having said that, never forget the Ukrainian military was the second largest military in Europe. It had spent 8 years getting trained to NATO standards. They had good equipment, good leaders, good soldiers, and they're well motivated. They're defending their homeland. And they will fight when given the opportunity. And the Russians know this. Believe me, the Russians learned that lesson the hard way early on in this conflict. So the Russians are going to have to be careful to ensure that they retain all of the advantages that they have in terms of fire supremacy, etc. And you lose that when you bring in maneuver. Maneuver is the great equalizer. Maneuver allows the enemy to use intelligence and firepower, but different kinds of firepower to dissipate the enemy's strength. And I think the Russians are not going to want to fight the maneuver battle. Now, what are they going to do? Long story short, I think Russia's made it clear that the Ukrainian government has lost the privilege of ever governing an ethnic Russian or Russian speaker again. I mean, if we close our eyes just for a second and just listen to the laws that have been passed, banning Russian language, banning Russian culture, banning everything Russian. Now, just replace the word Russian for a second and add the word Jew. And now we understand how odious the Ukrainians are and how despicable it is that the United States supports these people. This is a government that hates people, that hates cultures. The Ukrainian nationalists view themselves as modern day supermen. They're the Aryan race. They view the Poles as subhumans. They view the Russians as subhumans. And even though people say Zelensky's a Jew and they're with him, they view the Jews as subhumans. It's not me saying this. They say it themselves. There's video after video after video of them saying this exact thing. The Russians are not going to allow these odious Ukrainian nationalists ever again to have the honor and privilege of ruling over Russian ethnic Russians or Russian speakers. And therefore, all territory in Ukraine where there is a significant Russian population, historical connection, etc., will become and will forever be Russia. I think we're looking at Novaya Russia that spreads from Transnistria through Odessa, down through Kherson, Nikolaev, Dnipropetrovsk, up to Kharkov, and that will be forever Russia. And that's that. And then if the Ukrainians want to argue that point a little bit more, then they'll lose everything else because the Russians aren't going to stop. Denazification doesn't just mean killing and imprisoning the criminals who tattoo their bodies with swastikas and take up arms to murder, rape, and torture Russians. Mainly Russian civilians, by the way, because they're not the bravest of people. They don't do too well when they go up against Russian Marines, Russian paratroopers, or soldiers who are ready to kill them in combat. They tend to surrender. Thousands of them did because they're not that brave. But they're going to go on trial. The world's going to see the reality of the odious nature of their crime. But that's not denazification. Denazification is the elimination of the ideology, which means any political party that shows any loyalty to this ideology must be terminated. And termination means never allowed to exist again. And those who are members of that political party must be criminalized, which means that they have to be held accountable for their crimes. This is harsh, but this is what we did to the Nazis at the end of World War II. And the threat of Bandera's ideology is every bit as real as the threat of the Nazi ideology of World War II. It means that the Constitution is going to have to be changed. And if you're going to change the Constitution, that means you have to change the government. So Zelensky's not going to be in power. The Rada, the parliament today, the ones that made Bandera a national hero, they're not going to be in power. We're looking at an all-new Ukraine. That's what denazification is. Demilitarization means anything that is affiliated with NATO will not be allowed to exist. So Russia right now is writing lots of thank you notes to the various governments in Europe, thanking them for providing Russia with billions of dollars of their finest technology. Because everything that's being shipped to Ukraine today will either be destroyed by the Russian military or captured by the Russian military. But that's the reality. There will be no Ukrainian military around when this is done. They'll either be dead or captured or voluntarily disarmed and returned to their homes. That's what demilitarization means. And finally, neutrality. Ukraine will never be part of NATO. It will be permanently neutral. And that's just the reality of it. That whatever peace treaty is brought in will be dictated to the Ukrainians, just like we dictated the terms of surrender to the Japanese on the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay, because the defeat of the Ukrainians will be every bit as severe and without conditions as that suffered by the Japanese and the Germans in World War II. That's how I think this is going to end.
Okay, Mr. Ritter, thank you so much. I don't want to get you in trouble.
Whoop, yep, okay. Thank you, guys.